Good evening, everyone. I want to thank your mayor, Mr. Chen. Mr. Chen from this lovely city, and our representative, Council Members Riel Sebastian, for inviting us here to hold this meeting. And if you would like to open with some remarks, it's really appreciated. I think they're all live.
Welcome to Monterey Park, and I'm the mayor of the city, Peter Chan. And thank you for the roundtable. Come to the city, and I'm pretty sure you have heard pretty much a lot from our council member Teresa Riel Sebastian for many times. And glad that you come to the city and hear from us. And actually, visiting the city is not just the same as knowing it on TV or seeing it on the newspaper. And you will hear the plane noises if you go out when you come to the city or going back to your home. You'll hear them. And we do have some problems in the city. So hopefully we can come together and resolve it. I know it's a big problem. It's not easy to resolve, but let's work together and see some solutions. So thank you for coming, and hopefully we have a long time to talk and resolve the noise factors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your hosting us and the fact that we understand, even this far away from the airport, you are being inundated with airplanes. So we do appreciate that. Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Denny. Good evening, everyone. I'll add my welcome to the November 14th edition of the LAX Community Roundtable here in the City of Monterey Park. I am Steve Alverson. I'm with a consulting firm called Environmental Science Associates, also known as ESA. My job is to facilitate this meeting on behalf of the Roundtable. My primary job is to keep us on time and on task to make sure that we get through the agenda in a timely fashion and respect everyone's time. Also to keep our discussions respectful and open so that everyone feels comfortable in expressing their views. There will be a period for public comment this evening, which the chair will acknowledge, and we'll begin that process. And we certainly welcome you here and look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
I believe we have a quorum here, and before we get the actual agenda, the attendance taken, I'd like us to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Steve, if you'd call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Chairman Snyder?
Present.
Robert Namath, City of Rancho Palos Verdes. Jeff Thompson, City of Los Angeles.
Present.
Kendrick Okuda, Los Angeles World Airports.
Present.
Goran Erickson, City of Culver City.
Present.
Teresa Riel Sebastian, City of Monterey Park.
Present.
City of Redondo Beach, Roxanne Farabee.
Present.
360 at South Bay, HOA, Jim Riboletta.
Present.
Did I miss anyone? Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And there's two gentlemen that are here with us tonight that I'm very pleased to introduce. They are the leaders from this west coast of the FAA, and they've joined us to this meeting. Mr. Denning, Clark Denning, is the, well, I'll let you tell him what you do.
Yeah, very good.
And
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Clark Dessing. Clark? Okay, maybe this works better. My name's Clark Dessing, and right now I am in LA, living in LA, acting as the regional administrator while we're in the process of making a permanent selection. I think most of you knew Dennis Roberts, or may have knew Dennis Roberts. He did retire. So I'm kind of standing in that position right now as we go out and get a permanent regional administrator. My permanent job is actually the director of the Air Traffic Organization's Western Service Center in Seattle, Washington. And we provide all the support services for air traffic control throughout the western United States. We're very glad to be here, and our intention from the Regional Administrator's Office here in LA is to make sure that we attend all of the major roundtables like the Los Angeles Roundtable. So you'll see either myself or the permanent selection when they get in place at these meetings going forward from this point.
And of course, we appreciate your being here. Dave?
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Dave Foyle. I'm the General Manager for Air Traffic Services in Southern California. So the folks at LAX and Southern California TRACON, those are all facilities that I have responsibility for, and I'm a permanent selection for this position. So at future roundtable meetings, you should expect to see me at those, and it is on. Yeah, actually. Sorry, the bass rumble. We will be participating, as Clark mentioned, both myself and somebody from the Regional Administrator's Office at future meetings. For the ad hoc and technical meetings, we'll provide folks with a sufficient level of technical expertise to participate in those meetings as we proceed forward. Thanks.
We actively welcome you and are really looking forward to working closely with you to get these topics, if not immediately resolved, at least working on them and moving in the right direction quickly. The first item on the agenda is comments from the public. How many people would like to be making comments? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you could use 2 minutes, and which, I guess the podium. If you'd come up to the podium and get behind each other, please give your name and what city you're from and what you'd like to say to us. Come on up.
First of all, let me welcome the Los Angeles International Airport Community Noise Roundtable to the City of Monterey Park, a city that was voted a year ago by Money Magazine as the third best place to live and raise your family in the entire United States. My name is Mitchell Ng. I am a council member and past mayor of the City of Monterey Park. And I just want to take a moment. I know we have 2 minutes, and only 2 minutes, but I want to thank the first responders who are out there fighting the fires. We have 8 firefighters that are out there at the Woolsey fires. I know that it encompasses and burnt already 98,000 acres of land, and it's only 52% contained. But I want to thank our firefighters and first responders who are out there, and we are praying for your safety. And we also want to say that we are thinking, and our prayers are with the families who have lost loved ones out there during this time. I represent a community of 62,000 residents, and I would invite anyone on a Saturday morning to come to my driveway in the Highlands part of Monterey Park, which has an elevation of probably 980 feet. I can see the underbelly of the planes, and there are times when I can actually see the windows of the planes. I can identify all the airlines because I can see their logo. And to me, that's somewhat probably flying too low. And no matter what FAA says, I can guarantee you it's much lower than what they're saying. And I will guarantee you that one day we will do a study on the health effects of our residents with all those low-flying commercial planes. We're approximately 25 miles away from the airport, but yet the route makes a U-turn above our city. And I'm representing students who are complaining that it's flying over their playgrounds. I'm here to represent the families who are saying that that they wake up early at midnight when the planes fly over. They're awoken before 7 a.m. When the planes fly over. So whatever FAA says, I can guarantee you they're inaccurate. So once again, I know there's only so much you can do on the roundtable. Everybody has their interest, and you represent your communities. But I just want to reassure that one day, as our community comes together, we're going to make sure that this is resolved. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Ma'am?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Helen Liu. I'm a resident of the Monterey Park. And last time, like a roundtable in LAX, I was attending that meeting too. Today, I want to tell all the you guys and Monterey Park, for my understand, only like when emergency, the flight over our city. But right now, is not right now, I moved here already 3 years, okay? It become to the daily one. And so early, like 6-something a.m., already fly over my house. And the midnight, one time is 12:10 already, past the midnight. They still have an airplane over our house. You know, I go out to check, it's a huge one. I don't know how low, I think maybe like 2,500 feet, you know, because it's a huge one. You can see all the side, window, whatever, right? So I don't think so this is right, because it's not emergency. Why they happen every day, it's sunny day and not snowing, no raining? No, why? They just continue like, you know, like attack the Monterey Park, make me feel this way, and make my blood pressure to go higher. It is the truth, okay? And the second one, because too many lower flying to the Monterey Park and cause Monterey Park like a property, like a value go down. Because the real estate agents say, oh, they don't want to buy the Monterey Park. I said, why? Monterey Park is a good city. You know, we have like a small one and friendly, you know, everything is really good. But the thing is, that one causes a problem, and people doesn't want to buy the house in this one. And all the around like San Gabriel Valley, like Alhambra, San Gabriel, Temple City, Arcadia, all that, everybody know the houses go up and up. But only the Monterey Park just stuck here because of that one. So I have to complain this one and see like, you know, what you can do. It's not like a go like every time.
Thank
okay?
you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can't figure out how to get this thing to work properly.
Good evening. Hi.
Go ahead.
My name is Amy Pham. I'm a recent resident of Monterey Park. My family and I bought here last year. And actually, I was really surprised to find, given the distance from LAX, how much of a problem these airplanes are. And I don't need to reiterate, I know you guys understand that the planes are flying frequent and they're flying very low, as everyone else is here saying. I'm just here, I'm also Deputy City Attorney for the City of Los Angeles. And as working for a bureaucracy, I understand that sometimes, you know, it's the loudest people that get, you know, the results. And, you know, I just find that this is not the makeup of this community. I mean, generally, people like to just do the right things, keep quiet, keep to themselves, and I hope that that doesn't get taken advantage of, you know, and this is a persistent and continued and really big problem for this community, and like she said, it does affect property values, things like that. Given the fact of its location, of great public schools, I mean, this is really the thorn, I think, for this city. And so, you know, I really hope and pray that you guys are able to do something.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Margaret Leung, and I am a planning commissioner for Monterey Park City. But today, I will be speaking on behalf as a resident of Monterey Park, as these planes do impact my life because they go directly over my house. These planes come in directly over Monterey Park and before they disperse. So these planes are 100% of these planes coming into Monterey Park do go over my house. So with that said, I do want to start with some thank yous. I first met the roundtable in 2016. I made my presentation at LAX, and the roundtable was very gracious and invited us back for a presentation and discussion, and re-energized and re-engaged the city for discussion to resolve this particular issues. And in November of 2016, I asked Santa for two things. And one is to get more data, the monthly data report. And second was basically for the roundtable to drive the health bill to include the LAX Metroplex as part of the health study. And I got my wish, a little bit late, but I did get my wish, so I did get a Christmas present that year. I do want to continue to talk about this particular health bill. I want to encourage the roundtable continue to drive to ensure that this health bill includes LAX Metroplex. LAX Metroplex is the second largest in the country. And this particular flight path that goes over Monterey Park, part of it goes over the Brightwood. So all Brightwood parents should be concerned with this flight path. The topography of this school has a little berm with these exhausts from the airplane flying so low.
Thank you, Margaret.
I do have a few other things. I just have 30 seconds. Let me say,
Let me request, because we still have a lot of other people that wanted to speak. If you could. Okay.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Actually, may I interject? Because
So-
Helen, I'm sorry, Margaret, and I want to make sure they don't take your time away. But I was just informed by a law representative that you could not give your time to someone else because Miss Helen had requested extra time. So I think if we're going to provide it to one, we should provide it to all, gentlemen, just to be consistent.
Helen, did you
So I
need
think-
2 minutes?
Okay. And then, no, but did you want to speak an extra 2 minutes, Helen?
Okay. All right, let me, how many other people want to speak? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, yes.
As a member, I can still go and speak during oral communications.
Absolutely. You have unlimited time.
No, I have 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm just going to make a decision of 30 seconds more, and
you
and
said
anything
2
beyond
minutes.
that, please send it to me.
Okay, 30 seconds. So many people ask me that, are we making progress? The answer is no, we have not made any progress. As you can see, we have Monterey Park is on the work order, work program item number A7. That item has been outstanding since 1998. We've been working on this issue for 20 years, so we have not really made progress. So I would encourage all the residents in Monterey Park to read what is in work program A7. And if you look at the statistic for 2017, there was 39,000 airplanes that came through Monterey Park. Of those 39,000 airplanes, 75% of them were below 3,500. And to that, the alarming part was that 13,000 of them was at 2,500. So, and there was also a handful of them, not handful of them, 83 of them that was below 2,500. There was some couple of them that was in 2,100, 2,200, and they were coming through over my house at all hours of day. And this over-the-ocean approach, I don't know how many times have I received, almost on a weekly basis, that there is some sort of repair at LAX that they cannot use the over-the-ocean approach. They
So-
have to
so
fly over a
Margaret,
house
that was an
between
additional
12
minute.
o'clock and 6 in the morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Liu. Welcome to Monterey Park. I appreciate that you
Thank
guys
you.
spend precious time to listen to us. I'm a 35-year resident in Monterey Park, okay, and I disappointed. So I wasn't intend to come, but Paul called me and said, "Oh, you forgot?" I said, "Yeah, I remember." Okay, so I show up. So before I show up, I go and check the website of the flight track, and I noticed that all the planes did not come to Monterey Park during the 2 hours I'm checking. They all make a right turn between 710 and 110. And that is, I think that is what should be going. And I appreciate that whoever direct the traffic is really avoiding us. I want to read the forum. It said, this forum provides a mechanism that attempts to ensure cooperation between airport and the local impact community in achieving noise impact reduction to those communities wherever possible without shifting noise from one community to another. I felt like Monterey Park is being shifted from somewhere else to Monterey Park. So I think that I take this statement very seriously. Now, if the plane is in Monterey Park, now we are saying that the same argument say you don't want to shift the noise from Monterey Park to somewhere else. But we are the receiver from somewhere else. So I think this is a conflict of interest. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
In the effort of time, the next person that wants to speak after this gentleman, please come on down. If you'll line up over here, so we'll take the most time. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Carl Wong, and I'm with the Monterey Park Environmental Commission. So I'm speaking on basically as a resident and also as part of the commission in here in town.
If you could speak closer to the...
Yes.
Thank
You for coming to our city here to provide this roundtable for the community here. I just want to basically bring a couple points that can probably be worth for comments from your staff or crew. Obviously, we are dealing with almost the same questions from almost everybody, like how, that all these landing flights that are going around our city, even to the neighboring cities, and understand too that from the previous technical workshop that LAX has provided, I think a year or so ago. For example, some of the technologies that are provided, more like the global positioning system, that's more like providing the precision guidelines for the landing of the airplanes, just to reduce the amount of routes that's going past our city and also even the neighboring communities. My question is, I don't know if there's some kind of mitigation that the LAX or solution, to prevent all of these issues that's coming, from around our own city and also the neighboring cities. Some of the times that the flight change directions from our city to other cities or to the neighboring cities, but it all depends on the routes also, I understand. So I don't know what sort of technology or mitigation or solution that LAX can provide. The other thing is, so it's really more of a question of a bigger picture of a NIMBY issue. The other thing that the second point is that understand that all of this noise pollution is really noise nuisance. But is there any other thing that also related to it? There's something to do with jet pollution issue or the air pollution with the NOx issue, particulate matter, any sort of sulfur dioxide, maybe that's
your
probably
time.
not visible.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, my name's Jimmy Walkie. I'm the treasurer of the Historical Society in Monterey Park.
Could you please get a little bit closer to the mic?
What?
A little closer to the
Closer?
mic. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I've been a resident in Monterey Park for over 35 years. I live on Barnum Way, just below Sequoia Park. And first of all, I want to thank Galawa, air traffic controllers, and the pilots for the decrease in traffic beginning this November 2nd. This is this past 1.5 weeks, except for the days of the 6th and the 7th when many planes were flying over, but as far as the other days, there was a lot less traffic than I ever remembered. What I remember is that the traffic starts between 7 and 7:30, and it's continuously. I can hear one plane after another, and they're just flying over very lowly. And this is usually continues during the mornings. And then I also remember 6 or 7 months ago, for 2 weeks, we didn't have any planes flying over. But then in the news, Compton and Culver City complained about the traffic. So I figured that's where it was sent during that time. And then after that 2 weeks, planes started coming over Monterey Park again. And so apparently they have much more clout there than we have. For all of these years, it's been like this. These planes have been coming over, and it's kind of upsetting that we should be the brunt of all of these planes coming over. And I count between maybe 20 and 30 planes an hour when it's really bad, 20 to 30 planes an hour. I think that's just too much for our poor city to handle for all of these years. I think something needs to be changed. Some of the traffic has to go to other cities. I don't mind planes flying over, but 20 to 30 an hour seems like a lot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Just as a general point of interest, everyone, we have Lawa going to give us a presentation on the air traffic over this city.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sam Chung. I'm an environmental commissioner for the past 2 years for the City of Monterey Park. Born and raised in Hong Kong, immigrated over here in 1977, and loved this city so much, so peaceful, such a nice community, parks everywhere, restaurants everywhere. Chinese food is great.
Yes, it is.
And then the thing is that just this problem seems to be getting worse and worse and worse every year. I've been here all these years, and it seems like I'm hearing more and more complaints from every resident here in our city. And I'm sure, I understand there's an alternative cost to every decision that you make. If you don't have the airplanes fly over here, then it's got to go somewhere else. Just as that gentleman had mentioned, you know, no one's been complaining about Compton because, you know, it's flying back over here now. So I think that you guys really need to work on a plan with the FAA to really minimize the amount of flights that come through this city. We are so proud of our city. We are so proud of what we have accomplished all these years with the limited resources that we have. We're expanding, and I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody that we just really would appreciate your help into at least lessening the amount of flights that come through this city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Armin Sebastian. I live on Fulton Avenue in Monterey Park, and I'm here on behalf of myself and my neighbors who hear the low-flying airplanes every day, night and day, midnight, daytime, morning, afternoon. And one of my concerns, I don't want to reiterate what they were saying, is the pollution that this low-flying airplanes spew out. I mean, they are really low, so low that I can oftentimes see their logos. And I'm thinking to myself, besides the noise issue, there's got to be a problem with the breathing all those exhausts from those huge planes, day in and day out. And we have kids and schools right around our neighborhood. So I want for you guys to also consider the noise, besides the noise, the pollution and particulates in the air. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Teresa Riel Sebastian. I'm here speaking as a resident of the City of Monterey Park. First of all, I just want to let everybody know that there's this fabulous little device called Air Noise, which I subscribe to. So every time you see an airplane, you hear an airplane, you click it, and it tracks the number of planes that are flying over. And I wanted to submit as part of the documents, I have 2 reports here. One was over 7 days. I clocked in 94 airplanes. That's over 7 days because I was home on and off. One day, I clocked 72 airplanes on September 28th. And they were flying anywhere, let me see, the lowest one was 2,475 feet above sea level. Now, mind you, my home is about 400 feet above sea level, so they were close to 2,000 feet above my home. And I'm not going to reiterate what my colleagues and my community has said here, my neighbors have said, but when these planes keep flying over, you start getting anxiety because you know there's one coming, and the problem with Monterey Park is that they're not flying the way they do over many of your cities. They're making a turn. So as they start turning, they rev up those engines. You can hear the noise from the plane, and it's this loud noise like this, all of a sudden, and it just goes to the sky. And I wish each one of you can hear it, and I've tried capturing it on video, but it does. All of a sudden, I have to start bringing this out because I get the anxiety. I could start smelling the exhaust, and I start getting an asthma attack. And I realize that. And so if it's happening for me, and I'm a relatively healthy person, I used to run marathons, imagine what's happening to our elder population, to our youngsters, to those, I don't know, thousands of children that have asthma now. So this has gone something beyond. And I'm not saying stop flying over Monterey Park, but let's share the love here a little bit and just shift it. And this issue about, well, I know my 2 minutes is up, and I will honor that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you. And we did have 2 written submittals, one from a person, Thomas Aquinas, and he was not concerned about the airplane noise. And we had one from a Chris Manaselli, and he had a lot of concerns about the same things that you folks have already expressed, and I thank you for being here to make that expression. The next item we have on our agenda is Lau is going to put together, has put together a presentation on the aircraft going over this community. And I want to make a comment to everyone so that you understand that Lau is not the one responsible for the aircraft. Our friends in the FAA right here are the ones that design where the planes are going to go. And so they have been very helpful to us in helping to identify which problems we have to go after and try to look at, and that is exactly what we're working on to try to do. Thank you, David. Go ahead.
Right. Thank you, Denny. Good evening, everyone. I'm David Chan with Los Angeles World Airport. This evening, I would like to share a new report that we recently created for aircraft flying over Monterey Park. As many of you know, we've been providing statistics regarding aircraft overflight over Monterey Park to 3 cities, Monterey Park, Malibu, and Rosemead, since the early 2017. We recently made improvements to the report, so tonight I'd like to go over some of the features of the report as well as the current statistics. So with that, I include a copy of the report in the agenda packet. I will also display on the screen so everybody can follow along. Of course, the first page is basically a cover page showing the theme building for LAX. Unfortunately, the restaurant in that building is now closed, and didn't have a chance to go by and test it out before that. But I heard it was a great view. I'm not sure about the food, though. All right, the second page basically gives you some background information about aircraft flying over the city in that description up there. And then you have a map on the bottom showing about an 8-hour sample of the arrival coming into Los Angeles International Airport. So it's been a few minutes to talk about the aircraft affecting Monterey Park, since I heard so many comments earlier about certain turns and certain effects regarding the approach. So essentially, aircraft coming from the north to land at LAX, they follow the route called the north downwind, and then they normally make the turn at or just east of the 110 freeway to join the final approach to land at the airport. However, when there's high traffic volume, air traffic controller will have to instruct those aircraft to travel further east before making the turn, so thereby causing the aircraft to fly over Monterey Park. They will have to do that because during high traffic levels, you have a rival coming in from the east, and one coming in to land on North Complex, another coming in from the south. So in order for those north arrival to join the final approach path, there has to be a spot, an opening in the arrival path from the east to let that aircraft in to join the final approach path for landing. It's a matter of separating the aircraft for safety, and essentially during high traffic volume, there's hardly any spot available. So the aircraft will have to continue heading east. They cannot just stop midair, so they have to continue going somewhere. So they have to continue east before there's an opening available. Same situation when we have inclement weather condition that probably can limit the pilot visibility. In that situation, the FAA will also increase the separation standard for aircraft arriving into LAX. So those are the two situations where they have to extend the north downwind route over Monterey Park and some other areas as well. This next page gives you the statistic on a monthly and annual basis. The top chart shows you the month-to-month figure for the most recent 13 months. Essentially, in May, we had the highest number of overflight over Monterey Park, and that's mainly due to the weather condition that normally occur during the summer month that impact visibility and consists of cloudy condition, May gray, or June gloom. Also, I want to note that during the summer, we tend to have a higher traffic volume during summer because of the summer travel season. And then on the annual numbers on the bottom, we acknowledge that the operation at LAX, particularly arrival coming from the north, has increased for the last 5 years. And that also contributes to the increase in overflight over the city. Also want to note, from 2015 to 2017, during those years, we had a lot of one-way closure activity at the airport. Pretty much consists of adding an extra buffer zone on each one-way in case the aircraft unexpectedly overshoot the runway. So that construction occur on all 4 runways. It take one runway at a time. And so that was completed in 2017. That, I believe, also contributed to the increase in overflight over Monterey Park. And lastly, this is the last page of the report. Something new is shown in the top portion of the report. Pretty much you've seen the 3 donut shapes there. The first one being capturing the arrival based on where they're flying. So it's broken down how many aircraft flying over other areas and how many aircraft flying over Monterey Park. By other areas, I mean areas that are closer in to the airport, to the west of Monterey Park. So you can see majority of them all flying over other areas. And with the, I can see from here, but I think it's about 30% that fly over Monterey Park. And then it break it down even further. Of those aircraft that fly over Monterey Park, it capture the altitude and the time of day. So essentially what the chart is saying, the most aircraft, when they fly over Monterey Park, they are in the lower altitude ranges, typically between 2,100 and 3,000 feet, and 3,000 to 4,000. Then majority of the aircraft, when they do fly over, they fly during the daytime hours. There's minimal overflight during the night. And then the last two charts are similar to the one we provided you previously. The top one gives you a comparison of the altitude over Monterey Park for 1 month for the past 3 years. And then the last chart gives you the idea of where the peak hours of operation occur. And you notice that from midnight to 6, there's hardly any activity over Monterey Park because of the over-ocean configuration. And I do admit that we do deviate from time to time from that approach, as Margaret pointed out. So that is essentially the new report we want to share with you tonight. We plan to distribute on a monthly basis to the jurisdiction. And we probably consider posting it online so everyone who have access to the report. So with that, are there any questions regarding this report? Sure.
Is that altitude based on sea level or by
It's based on mean sea level.
So if it flies over Monterey Park at 2,100 feet, it's actually flying over like 1,600 square feet.
Yeah, if you have an elevation of about 900 feet, then you subtract that.
My home is 1,000 feet from here.
Right.
And I'm at 4,019 feet above sea level.
Okay.
And I'm directly under the path. So that means I'm like 1,600 feet above them.
Yeah, you subtract whatever your elevation is.
I'd like to.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and take questions from the roundtable
members
first, and then I'm sorry, mic's not on. Take questions from the roundtable members first, and then the chair can open up to the floor if we have time to do that.
Mayor, excuse me, Chair, I would like to defer and have the community who's here, because we usually have these meetings at LAX, and I would like to hear what they have to say, and perhaps they may ask my question, and then I may not have any questions left to ask, but I would like to defer to the community first.
You got it.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, please.
May I suggest that they come up to the mic so that we can get it into the record? Because this meeting is being archived and preserved. It's being recorded, audio and visual. So if you can come up and take a mic, and if you have questions to ask. Anybody from the community would like to ask any questions on this agenda item? Actually, yes, if you could come. Margaret, do you have any questions?
Thanks your name.
Anyone?
This one's fine. Yeah, so my name is Emil Olgain, resident 509 South Huntington. So my question was, with regard to these altitude charts, if whether these charts refer to a mean sea level or did it take into account the topography? Because I am at 419 feet above sea level, so I would suspect that these planes are flying at about 1,700 feet above my residence.
Yeah, you are correct. It's based on mean sea level, so you will have to subtract the elevation of your resident from those altitude.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
So yes, my name is Margaret Leung, and I'm a resident of Monterey Park. And I too live on a ridge, and my elevation of my house is over 700 feet. And at times when these flights are flying over at 2,000, so you're running very close to that 1,000 safety distance, my understanding. And what I want to ask is that, will there be an opportunity for us to comment on this report that we're going to be receiving on a monthly basis? Based on what I'm seeing here, some of the data that exists in the old report is not here. I would like to see those data be shown. So I was wondering, would you guys be open to commenting this particular format that we will be receiving on a monthly basis?
Yeah, let me answer. Kendrick Okuda, Los Angeles World Airports. We'd be happy to receive comments, ma'am, and feedback on this report. As David mentioned, this is We're trying to do a graphical improvement, but if there's content that you think needs to be, we need to review, then I'd be happy to take that.
Thank you. I'll send you my comments. Can I have another question? So the reason why I'm asking for some of the old data references to be incorporated into the new format, I really like the new format. It's easier to read and it's easy to understand because now that you have pie charts. But I do want to make a comment that one of the points that you pointed out was May 18 of this year. Those particular flight that came into Monterey Park was at 5,822 flights came through Monterey Park. That is 56% of all the West arrival flight. So for Monterey Park, a tiny little city, to shoulder almost 60% or 56% of the flight coming through, it's really not really reasonable. And I think there is ways to do that based on the 2017 flight data. There are ample opportunity to raise the height of these arrivals. I've seen data in there. I know it's achievable. And I understand attending these meetings, you folks, Stephen has taught us well that we have to land at a 3-degree inclinations. And based on trigonometry and geometry, you could do that calculation. We could ask these flights to have at least a minimum of 5,500. I don't think that's unreasonable. Make the turn and then land at LAX. That is a very doable. I hope you guys take that into consideration.
Okay, I want to address Margaret's question about the altitude. Basically, there's separation standard that they have to abide by. I mean, they meaning the controllers. So, let's, for example, the aircraft coming in from the east, when they reach near Monterey Park, they are about 4,000, let's say, as an example. So, the minimum altitude, the minimum separation requirement is 3 miles lateral separation or 1,000 feet vertical separation. So the arrival coming on the north downwind, the distance from that between the arrival coming in from the east is about 4.5 miles. But when they make that turn to join the approach, the distance gets lower. So they cannot meet the 3-mile separation. So they will have to use the 1,000 feet lateral separation. So in most cases, they'll find lower at Monterey Park because the arrival coming in from the east, it was higher. So they have to maintain that lower 1,000 feet separation. Just want to clarify that.
Well, if I might add just a little bit more to that, that is largely accurate. There's also a requirement for us to join final at a separation from aircraft at the south complex as well. So I'm trying to avoid technical jargon to the extent I can, but they're what we call closely spaced parallel finals. And we have a requirement that one join 1,000 feet separated from the other. So I'm not saying that these are the actual altitudes, but if we're joining the final for the south complex for runway 25 left, we have to be 1,000 feet below that with the aircraft joining at the north complex, which puts us in a position where we don't have unlimited vertical altitudes that we can play with when we're turning base over Monterey Park. So it's likely that's not the answer you're looking for, but we have certain constraints that we have to abide within with our safety standards, and that's part of the challenge of finding a place to offer some noise relief to you folks here. Thanks.
Hi, and I'll just be real quick. Thank you, Margaret, for the presentation you gave, because when you brought up this chart, I looked at it, I said, wow, 30% of the flights are over the city of Monterey Park, while 70% is over all other areas. How many cities is all other areas in?
Well, it's all along the north downwind arrival route. So it's starting from Santa Monica, Culver City, West Adams, and moving forward, reaching your city.
Now,
Eventually.
I was taught
right.
when I was young, if you don't spread out the weight, the bar is gonna break, right? If Monterey Park, a little tiny city, is getting 30% of all the traffic, of airplane traffic, we're gonna break. Plain and simple. It's a little frustrating, and I understand there are certain standards that you need to meet with the FAA regulations and all, but I'm sure there's a way that you gentlemen could help the city out, because we are very frustrated as a community. Thanks so much.
I just need to point out that it's not 70% of all of the flights into LAX. It's only of this particular group of flights that are coming in that way.
Okay.
So but it is still a large number.
it's
There's still no question about that.
Monterey Park is getting 30% of everything in that route, in that path.
That particular route.
Thank you. It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, you're correct, Margaret. It's for the month of October. So. Any other questions?
I'd like to say something.
Sure.
My name is Raymond Mauna, and I live on East Markland Drive. I'm sorry I got here late. My parents were in aerospace, and my mother worked for Lockheed Martin. She was an electrical engineer on the F-117. She also helped build an L-1011, which is now out of service. My concern is we've been living here. They passed, and they've been gone now for more than 3 years. I have a tri-level property, which means that here's my home, here's the second level, my pool's on the third. Over the years, I've noticed everything. They're closer and closer. I know what an A380 is. I know what an L-1011 is. I know what an F-117 is.
We don't want the 117.
No.
Just so you know, the F-117's out of service too.
Yes, I know that. Yes, I'm aware of that.
Okay.
But my point is, what are the effects of the jet fuel? The emissions. Are there any health reports for any one of our citizens? And would you inhale that? Would you? But I have to because I live there.
And we've already taken public comment. I hate to cut people off, but if you have a question for Dave, that would be great.
I just said I got here late.
What's that?
I told you I got here
know,
late.
but if everyone got here late, then we would be here all
I thought it was
night.
important to say something.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But my job.
Thank you.
My job's to keep the meeting on time.
Yeah, okay.
And if you've looked at the schedule, I just want to point out to everyone that I've let this go a lot longer because I felt it was important because we're here so we could hear you. So
Yeah.
that's why we're doing this.
Okay, thank you. I had to just bring this up. Thank you very much.
Just to note, the health study you mentioned is in the new FAA bill that cover a wide range of cities, including Los Angeles.
So just to repeat that, there is, in the FAA authorization that the Senate adopted, there's air quality studies that are built into that to address your concerns. So
We're going to hear all about that later on in the program.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. If you can go back, well, you have the donut up there. And I heard all this discussion. You know, Monterey Park has been at this roundtable since the year 2000. And my family has lived at the same house since 1970. And we used to see the occasional airplanes flying really high, and we were fine with it. And now, as I said, it's just one after another. There are times when we just want to leave our home. And I love my home, I love my neighborhood, I love my city, but sometimes it just gets to that point that I have to leave. So my question is, there was a conversation about bringing up the altitude to 5,500 feet. And the comments was, well, there's a problem, it may not be doable because we have to keep certain separation. So my question is, in that donut that you had up there, that other slide, there's a section right there that says altitude is over 5,000 feet, and that was 2%. What occurred during that 2% circumstance that allowed the planes to fly at over 5,000 feet. Because obviously it is permissible, it is doable, and I want to know what are those factors and can we replicate them? Because, I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, to answer your question, Teresa, those that fly at a very high altitude, let's say for 5,000, they are essentially continue to travel east past Monterey Park. So the example I gave with Margaret about the 1,000 feet separation may not apply. So they will have to continue to travel further east before joining the rail. So when they travel further east, it tends to be at a high altitude. That's what we have seen based on the data we look at.
So the lower altitude means that they're turning at Monterey Park.
Right.
The higher the altitude means that they're traveling further east.
Right, before they're looking for a spot to join in. No spots available, keep going.
Yeah, Teresa, to put that a different way, if all the aircraft were at 5,500 feet or had to reach that, essentially every aircraft would come over Monterey Park instead of turning before Monterey Park. So the objective is to try to get them to turn before Monterey Park instead of be that high.
Oh, absolutely, and I completely agree with that. And I need to say this, and please, I'll stay quiet on other issues, but when the Metroplex was presented to our city, we were told that the required navigation procedure was going to be the procedure that would be implemented, and that the planes would then turn before the 110 freeway. And they told us, just wait, the Metroplex is going to save everything. You're going to see a drastic difference. They told me, they told the council, they told our staff, they told our residents. We had the FAA come out and tell us that. So we said, okay, you're telling us that, we will believe you. Here we are, and now it's even worse. And now when we asked them about this procedure that they told us was going to help, they're telling us they can't implement it. At least I was told recently that they can't implement it because they need another procedure called the TSAS to implement it. And that won't be available for another 2 years because they don't have the manpower to create it nor the funds to create it. So I'm going, wait a minute. We believed you, we supported it because you said it would help us, and now look at where we are. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to throw the FAA gentleman, and by the way, I immensely, immensely thank you for being here. And I'm glad that you're here because I had a 5-minute speech where I was going to berate the FAA for being absent from our meetings, so that's a speech I won't give, Denny. But I really do want to thank you because you have to be here. Our roundtable was created per LAWA, correct?
No, I was just a member supporting of this.
Okay, but in other words, the FAA did not create us. We are an advisory. We don't have power to change things. We can advise, we can write letters, we can beg and plead. But really, we don't have any authority other than that. And I want the residents to understand that. Because it is really frustrating serving on this, and your hands are kind of like this, and you just have to keep saying, please, 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 hear me. So and the ones that have the authority are the FAA, but I know that you're restricted by the mandate from Congress. Congress tells the FAA what to do. So in other words, I'm telling you, we have to hit Congress really hard. But gentlemen, what can you give to the community of Monterey Park and those communities that are affected by this extended downwind approach? What do you foresee, or what feedback can you give us, positive feedback, please?
Let me first start with next gen. So everybody's heard that term, I'm sure, right? And Metroplex being a piece of next gen. Next gen obviously was mandated by Congress for the FAA to implement, and that's providing the next generation air traffic control system. The very first building block of that you've experienced. It's Metroplex, and it's bringing the satellite-based navigation to the navigation system versus ground-based navigation, which is the old legacy air traffic control. Many of the aircraft are equipped with the new equipment, but not all. We don't have separation standards in place that allow Dave and his controllers to bring them in closer so they don't have to have that 1,000-foot separation. We're working on that in Denver right now. They're the baseline site for that. You mentioned TSAS, that's terminal spacing and sequencing. That tool is in development, also a very advanced, basically software program that help controllers determine where airplanes are going to fit, and so they can make their decisions on sequencing further out, away from our communities. So in the future, yes, I think NextGen will give us the relief we're looking for. For the immediate time, other than keep studying it and looking at it and trying to find ways to make improvements on noise, we're making an effort to try to hit as many community meetings and hear your concerns, and then going back and looking at it and seeing if there's anything we can do to lessen the burden on the communities while we're waiting for full deployment of NextGen. That's the best answer I can give you. And Dave, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Well, just to add a little bit from the operational perspective, LAX is the third busiest airport in this country. By our standards, we count aircraft. Airport authorities often count passenger enplanements, but we look at the number of aircraft that we have to work. So LAX is not only the third busiest in this country, it's the third busiest in the world in terms of average daily aircraft worked. Roughly 1,000 arrivals a day and about 1,000 departures a day. I don't know the breakdown between north wind, downwind, and south downwind, but it's probably roughly 50-50, so figure 500, of which something less than 50% are north downwind, of which you're getting 30% of that. It's a long-winded way of saying I don't know the exact traffic count of the aircraft going over on a daily basis, but we've seen the LAWA figures in their report, and I believe those to be accurate. They are derived from FAA sources. Hugely challenging airport to operate. Metroplex, if flown on the north downwind, rather than being vectored for a visual approach or turned in earlier if the weather conditions allow or traffic on the straight-in allows, it does undeniably put more traffic over Monterey Park than there once was. I mean, the figures support that. The FAA's commitment is that we will be attending these meetings on a regular basis. We've been a little haphazard in the last couple of years, but our commitment for the future is that we will be regular attendees, answer questions if we can at the meeting, and if we can't, our commitment's to come back and to provide answers to those questions. But in general, we want a group like the Roundtable, which represents a cross-section of cities affected by LAX traffic, to have consensus recommendations to the agency about things they'd like us to study for feasibility and whether they can work on from a safety standpoint. And we eagerly await that sort of input from the Roundtable as a whole, and it's part of our responsibilities to engage with the community and to have these conversations with you all, so you can expect to see us in the future.
Thank you.
Miss-
Can I address a question? Last one, sure. We're here, the things affecting you folks is the most important thing to address. We're here, the most important things to address are what
I
you're
have been
doing.
watching the web track of the flight for the last 4 or 5 hours. They all turn east of 110 and west of 710. And I want this gentleman, who is an expert on this, explain why today Monterey Park is blessed that airplane does not turn in Monterey Park last 4 or 5 hours. If we can put the web track on the thing and we'll all see airplane turn. Okay? I am not technical, I'm not politics, but I like to see why today we are blessed. No traffic turn in Monterey Park. It's all turn east of 110, west of 710. Thank you.
Sir, it may be because we're having the roundtable here in Monterey Park tonight.
I just want his way he obtained his data. He figure out why.
So David mentioned weather conditions as a reason why May in particular was a bad month for you. May is May gray and June gloom. Today we have no fires affecting the basin and we have perfect weather. That's probably the factor that caused flights to turn earlier.
And
Because
also,
when ground traffic control can see the flights coming in and they can route them visually, they'll route them visually. And today is a stellar day in terms of weather. So there's clarity, there's high visibility.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a question for Lava and a comment. I really like these charts that you've done for Monterey Park. So I wonder if you could do the same for Calif City and the Dogger waypoint. We would really appreciate that.
will be up to Kendrick to
Yeah,
make
so-
that decision whether or not we should produce another report.
Yeah, it does take a lot of effort, Goran,
Yeah.
but I'll be happy to talk to you offline as far as
Okay,
providing that
thank
data.
you.
There are other methods that maybe we can provide that to you in a more meaningful way. Is that okay?
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
great, thanks.
And then a comment to Monterey Park. I know that the City of LA have a tolling agreement with FAA and have a discussion, and they're talking about the altitude when it passes or West Adams area, which is basically west of downtown LA. So there might be a interest for Monterey Park to approach LA City and see if there is something that you can learn from that and something that have value for you in that discussion with FAA. And of course, it's up to LA if they want to play ball, but that would be
It's not just up to LA. One of the reasons that we're started with that one was because it was one that we could work on comfortably, and it's a model for how we're going to address all the other issues on the roundtable. So the answer is yes.
Yeah, and I've heard this criticism. Keep in mind, I know Monterey Park has its own issues, and you guys have been struggling with this issue, but I hear it from folks in Palisades for different reasons. I hear it in people, excuse me, I hear it from the West Adams people for different reasons and different heights. So there's no community in Southern California that's not experiencing any noise or has had their flights routed away from them since Metroplex has gone into effect. If you've been following Burbank, they've been dealing with their own issues regarding flights and the way that they're routed. So the reason why we focused on the ad hoc committee, which we'll talk more about, we have an agenda item and I'll speak to it, why we focused on Dodger is because it's at the center of this north downwind arrival. So on one side you have Palisades, on the other side, let's say it's Monterey Park. It's right in the middle. So if we can get that piece in the middle right, our hope is that that will actually positively impact you. And we are starting to see that data, and I'm going to talk to that a little bit later tonight.
Thank you. I do want to move forward. We're only about a half hour behind schedule now.
40 minutes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I needed that. Kendrick, if you would like to talk about the noise reporting. And I just want to point out to everyone that we do want you to report your issues because we still use that as a guide as to how to approach some of these issues. So I don't want to discourage you in any way from putting in complaints.
So while we're waiting for this to load, I'd like to again reintroduce myself. I'm Kendrick Okuda from Los Angeles World Airports. I represent LAWA on the Noise Roundtable. And again, want to thank the City of Monterey Park as well as the residents who come tonight. We do appreciate you taking the time to make your comments. So that said, that's a good segue for this slideshow. We at LAWA have a big component of understanding what these issues are based on comments that we receive from the public and those that are experiencing noise issues. And so what we've done, and I'm going to ask you to look at my slideshow because I've updated these slides versus your handouts, and this is much easier to read. So we wanted to make sure that we had a better and more efficient system. We have limited resources and wanted to make sure we make the best use of my staff and our resources. And so we looked early in the summer to integrate a new system to help to make the system more efficient. And we've done that a couple of ways. We're enhancing the existing methods, and you'll see the smart web form, the web track that the gentleman just mentioned, mobile web app, and the phone line. Those are the three major ways we're getting your noise comments. And I want to really express that we're not changing these existing features, we're just enhancing them. We're making them more efficient, and we're going to provide some better integration for you, the persons that are making the comments. We also want to look at additional reporting and flexible map options. And we're here today to introduce this to you because we're planning to implement these improvements on December 3rd. So this is how the system works. There's three main inputs that I, again, will repeat: the web format, the mobile web app, and the phone line. The web form now has a new system where you register online and you register yourself, so you're able to then conveniently log in for future use and not have to repopulate your information. The mobile web app has been integrated better again to have, it works quicker to submit your noise comments and then is able to better integrate it into the database. So you see those three inputs are all going into the center of your slide, the purple viewpoint, which is what we are introducing on December 3rd. Finally, the phone line, we've updated that. It's a hotline that has interactive voice response system that will hear your voice and capture the information as you're prompted to give us the information. ANOMS is a fancy word for the way we capture the data. All of this is better integrated, so we really have a more effective way of understanding your noise complaints and getting your information. Finally, this is the last slide. One of the features we have now is identity management. We're able to identify and consolidate multiple comments and allow you to be able to have your address validation upon submittal. And again, if you do register online, you just have to do that once, and that would allow you to skip re-entering your system. So you would go in and use your name and then create a password and then go back into the system. It's optional. It's really an enhancement to facilitate your being able to give us information. But it's, again, the other existing methods are still available for your use. We also are this helps to support more timely email responses when you provide your email in the online login system, and then we can timely provide emails that will look at the specific noise comment that you're making and try to identify whether it's north downwind arrivals or some other event like we might be experiencing now, and provide you that information. And just here, there's additional tools. We want to look at providing you the ability to identify emerging noise issues, and this is going to, again, be the foundation for dynamic interaction. And then finally, there was no additional cost for me and LAWA. We are using an existing subscription for about $20,000 a year to provide this service to the customer. And in closing, I just want to again thank you for being here. We really do want to be engaged with our constituents with regards to noise management, and we're here to be committed to providing the support and the data, as David has provided, to the communities. Thank you. Are there any questions from my fellow members? Any questions from the fellow members?
Thank you.
Just to restate, this will be implemented December 3rd. Is the
That's
target?
correct. We're launching it December 3rd.
Great.
I have a comment, and that is, this is good. This moves us forward. I was at a presentation at the National League of City, and the former head of the airport for Dallas-Fort Worth in Texas was there, and went through how they, as an airport, interact with the community. And they had a lot of very interesting way of how they had worked and worked through all these issues. So if you have a contact over there, and if you haven't already sort of shared the information, they really had some really interesting way of doing things that I think would be beneficial for us here in LA, because I don't think we do them exactly the same. And maybe there's something we can learn.
That's actually our goal, girls. So thanks for sharing that with me. If you can give me the contact after the meeting, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Chair, Mr. Chair, there's questions.
Just one.
Yeah.
Just so we can get you in the recording, Margaret. Thanks.
So thank you for updating the collective collecting the data. I think data is important. That's what we could speak to, instead of just talking, complaining about the same thing every meeting. I really like data. It provides us with a path moving forward and seeing the pattern. So one thing is that I find it very difficult for myself. I am not in the trade. It took me a long time to learn the nomenclature, the verbiage, asking Steve questions, calling David, many, many days. So I was wondering, is there a vehicle or a path or somebody or a way of asking technical questions so we could get some of these, a better understanding what are the challenges we have? Because my understanding right now is a geometry and a trigonometry problem, and how to meter the airplane. So to
Your
me,
name is Margaret, right?
Yes, my name is Miss Margaret.
You have contact with David, or I can give you my card after this meeting, and you can contact me.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Everybody
Thank you.
heard it.
All right.
David, correct me
We
if I'm-
also,
don't we have a directory or a glossary on our roundtable website?
that was going to be my point.
Okay, yeah, we have
Yes.
it on there.
There is that information on our website. It's also available on the FAA.gov. And for those that have been fortunate enough to attend the UC Davis symposiums on noise and emissions, there are several of these glossaries and other things available from their website as well. And their next event is going to be March 3rd, I believe it is, coming up this coming year. Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
I'm going to do a preface while Jeff is getting up there. Jeff heads up our ad hoc committee on flight tracks and works directly with a lot of the FAA folks. And his is the meat. His is where the rubber meets the road. This is how we can make the actual changes.
Hi, everyone.
You're on. You're on.
Hi, everyone. Jeff Thompson. I'm the LAX liaison for Councilmember Mike Bonin, and I'm the chair of the Metroplex committee that was set up through the roundtable to address some of the issues that you're experiencing here in Monterey Park, among others. Every meeting we have in the roundtable, I provide a bi-monthly update. So that's what I'm going to do here, and I start that with basically just a review of these north downwinds. So the north downwind, we've heard the report earlier from David, but this is all basically Asian, Australian, and Hawaiian traffic that comes over our heads. They're coming from the east, they come down the coast over the Pacific. I just got back from Hong Kong maybe 18 hours ago. I flew this route in my American plane. This is the flight path that you take when you're coming from over the Pacific. So this merges in with all the eastbound traffic coming from Chicago, coming from New York, coming from Europe. And that's what we've been focused on, because that's where we've been getting most of the complaints in the city of Los Angeles. That's where we've been getting a lot of the complaints from Palisades. And then a lot of the complaints in your area, most of it has to do with this. So we provide, there's a lot of numbers on the screen here, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But basically what we're doing is we're tracking to see over month how the heights have changed at the Dodger waypoint. So the Dodger waypoint, see if this laser works, is right over here. So that's roughly in the Culver City, West Adams area. And then, Norpie is right by downtown, and then you can see the turn that happens, it's supposed to happen around the 110 freeway. So we're tracking this. LAWA has been providing us a lot of support in providing us with this data. And this data is basically showing us what the heights are over that Dodger waypoint. 6,000 feet.
Excuse me, Jeff, is there a handout for this? Because I'm looking for it.
No, there isn't, but we'll post this to the web afterwards.
Okay, Mr. Chair, in the future, it would be good to have this in advance for the roundtable and also for the public, because it's really difficult to see. Thank you.
If I might ask, David, when you get this,
It's not David's fault, it's my fault, so I'll take that back and I'll provide it earlier.
okay, if you get it to David, if you would send it out to all the members first, and usually do. Thank you.
So you can see here the 6,000 feet is the standard that Dodger, that the FAA has set for Dodger. So 6,000 feet, most flights are supposed to be coming in around that 6,000 foot waypoint based on the star RNAVs that are established in the procedure. There's a 300 foot variance that's considered acceptable. So we don't expect every single flight to hit 6,000 feet exactly, and 300 feet is considered an acceptable variance. So you can see up here, this red line is basically anything above that is the above 5,700 feet, and the pink line is anything below 5,000 feet. The reason why we called out 5,000 and below is usually when we see a lot of flights coming below 5,000 feet, that's when we've noticed in not only the council office where I work, but also LAWA and some of the other council offices in the city, that's when we really hear complaints seem to go up. Because as you can imagine, a plane that flies lower is going to be noisier. And so we've seen those complaints go up dramatically. And so 5,000 feet seems to be that point for us around the Dodger waypoint. And keep in mind, we do have more traffic coming over Dodger than coming over Monterey Park. All the north downwind arrival traffic comes over Dodger, whereas only some comes out to as far as Monterey Park. Yes, that's correct. 6,000 feet is the standard, but you can see there's lots of instances where we're well below that. So you can see here, 5,700 feet and below for April, it was 12.6%, and then 5,000 between 5,000 and 5,500, it was 16%. And we had 5.2% that was between 4,500 and 4,900 or 4,999. And so we're tracking this month over to month to see how things change. And what we've seen, and I'm going to just forward the slide to show you some of the data from what we're seeing in October, is it roughly follows the same pattern. Things have gone up slightly in the overall percentages. You'll see 40% here versus the last for August was 32% in the dark blue. And then you'll see at nighttime those percentages here as well. So we're tracking between 10 and 7 a.m. because nighttime flights are obviously more disruptive. So since, I'm going to actually skip ahead so this makes a little bit more sense. As of August 30th, the FAA committed to us to bring all those flights, those nighttime flights between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. that fly over the Dodger waypoint. So these are on days when we're not flying over ocean operations. When we're diverting from over ocean operations, we're flying over potentially Monterey Park, we're flying over this area and Dodger. They committed to bring all flights above 5,000 feet after August 30th. That was done in the nighttime because that's when we experience the least amount of traffic. So that means all that Asian and Australian traffic that's coming and merging in with the East Coast traffic, there's just less traffic to merge with. There's less traffic coming from the east between 1 and 5 a.m. And so it's frankly easier for the FAA to merge that traffic at a higher level than it is when we're very busy during peak hours in the middle of the day, when we're not only getting traffic from the east coming from the Pacific, but traffic from the west coming over land from Europe and from the east, from the East Coast. And so they committed to basically, as of August 30th, get us above 5,000 feet. In the lead up to that meeting, in the last roundtable meeting, we had a lot of tension in that meeting, to say the least, about that 5,000 foot height, because the standard, as I just mentioned, is 6,000 feet. And so we went back to the FAA, and the FAA then agreed to raise the standard to 6,000 feet between 1 and 5. And that will be implemented most likely in March of next year, we're tracking to. And so that will hopefully provide some nighttime relief for folks, not only in the area around Dodger, but hopefully out here as well. Because the higher things are up at Dodger, the higher things are potentially here. The higher flights are potentially here. We're not going to dramatically slope a flight downward because of comfort level and passenger issues. And so that's one of the reasons why we've been focusing on this so much around the Dodger Waypoint. So with that, I wanted to show you some of the nighttime data that we've been tracking. So we're specifically, now that the FAA has basically committed to flying 5,000 feet at Dodger between 1 and 5 a.m., we wanted to track after August 30th to see what those results have been. And so you'll see here, hour 0 is not actually 1 to 5. That's hour 0. It's 24 hours is military time. So midnight to 1 a.m. is hour 0. And then you have 1 would be 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and then 5 to 6. And so you'll see here that overall in September, when this was first implemented, we had more flights coming in than we have in October. So you see 233 flights here. You also see that the flights during the peak time when this is implemented between 1 and 5, there aren't that many flights, but they do start to spike up later in the morning, which is a very disruptive time for a lot of folks, right? If you're 4 a.m., you're in deep REM sleep, hopefully then. You don't want to be woken up. And so this is a concern for us, and as we work with the FAA to push these heights up, we'd like to see these numbers particularly go down. Now, the trend lines are showing positive trends for October. You'll see here that again, the overall numbers have gone down, and we're seeing less below 5,700 feet and below 5,000 feet. Almost none during the time frame here. There were a few that came in below 4,750, which would be very disruptive. But in general, the numbers are improving. And so that does show us that we are making some progress in this. And I'm thankful to not only LAWA to providing us with this data, but also the FAA for actually addressing these concerns, at least in this time frame that we're talking about here. So where do we go from here? Well, we still need to actually implement this height for 6,000 feet, and that'll happen in March. The other thing that we've been asking for is to extend the hours out on either side. So right now it's 1 to 5. That's very low traffic for LAX. That's cargo traffic, that's some passenger traffic, mainly cargo. And so can we extend this beyond in hour increments? Can we look at the feasibility and do that? We do get a lot of nighttime traffic that's coming into LAX that's landing right before, these really dead hours of 1 to 5. We do get traffic sometimes delayed from the East Coast that comes in that late. Sometimes we have traffic from Hawaii or from wherever else coming down. The north downwind also handles San Francisco. So all San Francisco traffic comes down over your head as well. And so we get these later flights. So the FAA has agreed to actually look at our increments. We don't know when we could potentially implement those, but that is the longer term ask. Is to extend this 6,000 foot point, this standard, beyond the hours of 1 to 5 in hour increments. So, there's a lot of reasons why it can't happen overnight. There's labor issues, there's technology issues, there's overall traffic in the sky that they have to merge with, but this is what we're working toward. And the other thing that I just also wanted to thank the FAA personally on is thank you for attending tonight. Thank you for your commitment to continue attending. It makes our lives much more difficult when the FAA doesn't attend because it doesn't show interest from the agency. But to have you here is very impactful to our work, and I'm very thankful for that. The other update I wanted to give you is on what's called a charted visual flight procedure. So I won't go too much into the technical of this, but basically what a CVFP does is it's put in place for noise issues. It's put in place so that any flight flying over a particular area, whether it's flown on visual procedures, which to echo my point earlier today, that's why you're seeing not a lot of flights fly over Monterey Park today, because it's so clear. Most of them are flying what's called visual procedures with the clarity in the sky, where they can see. Charted visual flight procedures actually give us another document for the FAA to work with their staff to say, I need you to hit these heights. I need you to hit these heights more consistently, and we're doing it to be a good neighbor to the folks on the ground below.
Jeff, it's also not the heights, but also the ground track. That's the most important thing about it, about the charted visual.
So we once had a charted visual flight procedure in play until 2015 that would impact this area in Monterey Park as well. It was discontinued. We've since asked for it to be reestablished. So the Metroplex Committee, the ad hoc, worked with LAWA leadership, Kendrick, Samantha Bricker, and then Deborah Flint herself, the CEO of the airport, to request that the FAA establish a CVFP for the area. So I have a copy of this letter here. I think we have the letter posted online. If we don't, we'll make sure it's posted on the LAX Noise Roundtable.
Yeah, it's also included in the agenda packet.
Yeah, it's in the agenda packet. So this is from Deborah Flint, the CEO of LAWA, to the Paul Litka, who's the Director of Western Operations, is it?
Yes, he is. He's my boss.
Establishing charted visual, or asking for the viability to establish charted visual flight procedures. What those charted visual flight procedures would do is basically establish along this existing waypoint standards that are of 6,000 feet at Dodger. And they would roughly follow this existing path. The reason why this is important, and I keep getting this question every time I present on it, why aren't we flying 6,000 feet all the time? There's a lot of different reasons why. The technology that was mentioned and some of the limitations around that earlier by the FAA are one big reason. But a charted visual flight procedure is one way to actually help address this issue by making it a visual procedure that 6,000 feet is the standard. So we're not relying on technology of Metroplex. We're actually asking folks who are flying visuals, which is still a majority of traffic flying over our head, to fly 6,000 feet at Dodger. So those are the main updates I had for my presentation. I'll come back to the roundtable in January, our next meeting, and we'll show an update of what the data looks like for November, for December, and how things have hopefully improved with the heights that we're seeing coming out, not only over Dodger, but these are all north downwind flights, so a lot of them are eventually coming over to you in Monterey Park. Any questions from the roundtable, and then I can take general questions from the public.
I see we have one.
I'll ask after the public.
Okay. For the public, if anyone wants to ask a question, please come up and ask it on the mic.
I didn't hear you mention about the traffic. The traffic that have to come here to turn at Monterey Park. For many days, and I've been watching the sky, I saw a lot of Southwest airline flying, and I checked that actually come from Seattle or Portland, San Francisco. So I keep trying to see that you say anything. You finally say that some of them come from San Francisco. Seattle and Portland, are they supposed to turn in Monterey Park or not?
All north downwind flights, so thank you for clarifying. This is all Pacific traffic coming from Asia. This is Australian traffic. This is Hawaiian traffic. And this is West Coast traffic. This is Vancouver. This is Seattle. This is Portland. This is San Francisco. This is Northern California. I think there's now service up in Northern California from United. This is all that West Coast traffic coming down this. So, ironically, this is where high-speed rail could help, because we would have less people coming from San Francisco, but that's way too far off.
Teresa had one quick question.
Yeah, I have actually two. Actually, congratulations for getting that through. I know during the last roundtable there was a little bit of a glitch on the different flights. So I'm glad that was worked out. So questions, the reason I asked for the handout is because from where I'm at, it's kind of difficult to see there on the PowerPoint. And my eyesight isn't that great to see the small numbers on there. Robert's laughing. So during the rest of the time, are you going to also request that the elevation or the altitude be increased? So you're talking about hours between 1 and 5 a.m. So is the proposal going forward to increase the altitude for, 6 a.m. and on?
Yeah, that charted visual flight procedure, that's the primary goal. That's the first step in pushing for higher heights during all hours, not just nighttime.
So then, thank you, because then my question, well, I don't know if it's to LAWA or to the FAA. So right now they're flying, 5,000 maybe during the rest of the time, average guesstimate?
It depends on a lot of different factors, but yeah, let's
choose 5,000.
Sure.
So let's assume you want to increase it to 6,000, and we'll just make it very simple. So now there's a 1,000 foot that we have to account for. So does that mean that the planes are going to drop sooner to make a turn before the 110 freeway? Or does that mean that they're going to have to fly out further east? That means that is going to affect us, possibly, because now they have to fly out further east so that you can have your height, and if that's an issue, if that's the case, then that goes against our bylaws, which is to shift noise from one community to another. So can you please answer those two questions, someone up here? Thank you.
So let me clarify on one thing. One, we're not shifting any flight paths. We're not shifting any existing
No,
flight
but our
paths.
bylaws say, and sir, you pulled up the bylaws, I believe, right, to shift noise from one community to another?
Yes.
So that's my concern.
No, I understand, but there's been no request from the roundtable to move any of these existing flight tracks because we're under that limitation in what we can do. And so the reason why we're producing these reports, why LAWA is producing these reports, and why we're monitoring very closely is anything we change has potential ripple effects. We know that. We know that. And so we want to be very careful that we're not pushing more flights further to the east. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this in a very incremental basis, and why we're bringing things up at the nighttime at first, because it's frankly logistically a lot simpler for the FAA to do that. There's just not as many flights flying through the sky.
No, and that's why I completely supported it, because when I looked at our community, and I talk about the San Gabriel Valley, really, we don't get flights at night. I mean,
Right.
we will once in a while, and that's just because, we have someone that just didn't follow the procedure, whatever the case may be. We've had them at 2:30, 3:30 in the morning. But my concern is when we start elevating the altitude along the north wind, well, then you now have to make up that differential. So either it's got to be a steeper decline along the path, or you got to fly out further east. So thank you, Jeff, but I want to hear from the technical aspect, what happens with that 1,000 foot? Because I want it to be preserved in the record too, please. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, the answer is it depends. It depends a bit on weather. Higher altitude at Dodger doesn't necessarily equal a longer downwind if it's VFR weather and the aircraft can be turned and descended in. It may, at times, in June gloom or the equivalent, where we're full instrument approaches and we have to take the aircraft out farther and ensure that they join the final approach at or below the glide slope altitude, which is the 3 degree that some folks have referred to, then that may result in a longer downwind, which is, it just really does depend on the circumstances. What's the weather? What's the traffic volume from the east? It's possible that a higher altitude at Dodger may result in the inability to turn in to hit a hole. May result in the inability to hit a hole on the final from the east or not. It just kind of depends on where the aircraft at and what's the weather at the time. So sorry to, not trying to be unclear on the response, but it really does depend.
Hey, Dave,
Thank
can
you.
I
And
just ask?
Steve, actually, I think, Steve, you were nodding, saying something. If you can, please, I'd like to hear.
Sure. I mean, Teresa, based on years of seeing this information and looking at the data, I mean, the general concept is the higher the aircraft is at Dodger, the more difficult, under normal conditions, it's going to be to get that aircraft down. So it would push aircraft in general further to the east. Everything that Dave said is absolutely correct, but on a general basis, a higher altitude midstream is going to push aircraft further to the east.
One thing I wanted to clarify too, though, this charted visual flight procedure. So if you look at a time like June gloom or May gray, visual flight procedures won't kick in during those times. So we're asking as a first step to address times when, like today, we had extremely clear weather. We want charted visual flight procedures to see if those heights can come up higher. That wouldn't affect you as much because if it's a clear day, they're not turning this far east. So the CVFP will mainly affect just those really clear days, which is a majority of the days here at LAX, with the exception of those kind of gray times for us. And then the CVFP wouldn't be able, if we're dealing with very low visibility on a particular day, we won't be able to do a CVFP those days.
Thank you for putting the effort into putting the data together. I think it's wonderful to have that kind of data so we could talk apples to apples. In knowing that now the intention is to move the height from 5,000 to 6,000 at Dodger. And I was wondering, is there any way we could add to your data set, add a few more columns? So if we see at Culver City, is it? If the flight is at 6,000, at the entry into the Monterey boundary set, what height, what altitude it would be at? Would that be possible?
You're talking about specific incidents where we can track if it hits at 6,000 feet with a particular flight, let's say American Airlines Flight 192 from Hong Kong, which was my flight yesterday, what it's going to hit at Monterey Park?
Yes. It's just one extra columns.
Yeah, we can look at that. Margaret, we can look at that. I don't quite understand what you're asking, though, so if we could maybe talk offline and you can repeat the request, Jeff. I mean,
I think she wants to make sure that as we move things up on Dodger, that we're capturing what the impacts are in Monterey Park and drawing a clear link between the two, if there is a link.
Because I think that set of data would help Monterey Park immensely, not only on your effort, but it will help us track, because if it's right now, a lot of majority of the flight coming through Culver City is at target at 6,000. But however, by the time me and Tom, we sleep with the web track, and at Culver City it's at 6,000. By the time it gets to my house, it's at 2,500.
Sure.
And if you look at the data for 2017, they are consistently 13,000 airplane is at that level.
Right.
I can't believe that we cannot shift that volume of planes a little bit higher and have that plane maintain altitude and make the turn before you descend. I mean, I've watched these web track quite a bit, and me and Tom have discussed some of these patterns before.
Yeah, just one point of clarification. We've requested a charted visual flight procedure. It has not yet even been close to being implemented. So that's why we're in such close contact with the FAA. So all the daytime flights could potentially be raised up via a charted visual flight procedure, the ones that qualify. But we're still, at least 6 months at the bare minimum to implementing anything. Bare minimum, 8 months. Yeah.
Likely longer than that, just procedural development.
Jeff, let me echo that, because the letter for requesting the FAA study these and evaluate these procedures, we had anticipated that that we want to understand what the impacts are with the CVFP, and of course, a part of the mission is not to shift the aircraft. shift the noise impacts to other communities. So we understand that, and that's very precisely the reason why we at the airports at LAWA, who's the agency that it has the authority to request this study, made it very clear that we want to request the study and then you have a thorough evaluation by the expert at the FAA so that we all understand what the true impacts are. And we're not speculating or trying to misinterpret the data. And so that's why I think it's important that the FAA look at this, and we would be in partnership with them in studying it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I was just going to add. I work closely with Kendrick. We talk multiple times per week, and so as I'm producing my reports, that's based on his staff's data. I'll make sure I'm cross-checking it with Monterey Park to see if there are any implications during the nighttime flights, because that's the only place where we're actually going to see impacts in the immediate term, is nighttime, between hours and 1 and 5. Otherwise, we haven't actually had any changes made by the FAA on this. So.
Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff, I think also to explain is that, you know, the Metroplex and the north downwind flight path, the FAA defined the height limits, right? So at Calif, which is over Santa Monica, planes are supposed to be between 7,000 and 8,000 feet. And at Dodger, which is over West Adams, it's supposed to be at 6,000 feet. And one of the reasons why we started digging into this was that they were coming in at 4,000 feet at Dodger, and the question was, why is FAA not flying the procedure that they actually, in their environmental report, said that they were going to do? So it's sort of based on some of FAA's own regulations, and why they're not flying their own regulations.
So at first, I'm a little surprised to hear when you talked about flying over Monterey Park between the hours of 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. By procedure, all flight should be over the ocean approach during the hours.
This is for times when we're not on over-ocean operations. So last year, we had experienced a lot of diversions from over-ocean operations because of the runway maintenance. We have no major runway maintenance scheduled until 2019 at the earliest, I believe. There will be times when they do rubber removal from the runways, because we have such high traffic coming into LAX that when those planes land, they skid and they produce a lot of rubber.
Yeah.
But in general, we're not going to see the level of overflights during the nighttime that we would expect that we saw in the last year or so. And just so you know, I get a lot of complaints in my role as well. So even if I'm not hearing from Monterey Park, I'm hearing from folks that are in my council district, which is the west side. I hear from folks that aren't in my council district. I hear folks from a lot of different folks. So it's not something not something I can ignore in my role.
I just want to break in and let you know that LAWA is now posting the nights when they expect over-ocean operations not to occur.
Yes. So the hour was supposed to be from 12 to 6 in the morning. So when you said from 1 to 5, that's already squeezing us already on the schedule. Beyond that, I guess my question was, I was kind of curious when you talked about the CVFP procedure. My understanding is that when TRACON released the plane into Monterey Park, they are on the visual flight procedure. What is that going to impact it, or what's the difference between the two procedures?
They're either on a visual approach or they're on vectors to an instrument approach. So it's either way it could happen. If the FAA figures out that the CVFP is something that they can use, and I understand why they wouldn't, if they choose to, the ground track of that procedure will not come anywhere near Monterey Park. There won't, so that, if that procedure gets put in place, you won't have aircraft flying over Monterey Park when they're flying that procedure. That's the thing that most people get confused with. There are a number of different ways to get an airplane from the north across and then land at LAX, okay? And the problem these guys have down in San Diego who are running all these airplanes is they've got to figure out a way to take the guy who's on the north downwind and turn him and get him in line with everybody who's coming down the valley. And I hear these people a lot of times saying, it's kind of like the on-ramp to a freeway. It's not. On-ramp to a freeway is an on-ramp. You are on that track. And if you can't get on the freeway, you stop. Airplanes can't stop. Okay, so when they try to figure out to put an airplane into a spot in line to land, Sometimes it doesn't work out exactly the way they want it to for airplane reasons, pilot reasons, weather reasons, and so they have to fly them a little further, a little further, a little further north, okay? So the visual approach, and I know without getting into air traffic control 101, a visual approach means the air traffic controller says, you can fly where you need to fly. Look out your window. I'm going to watch you. You don't hit the other airplanes. Tell me you see the other airplanes. Pilot says, I see that guy. Okay, don't hit him. And this isn't how we say it, but don't hit him. And the controller has to hear, okay, I won't hit him. It's clear for a visual approach. So the pilot will then navigate where he needs to get in line, get behind the other airplane and land. Okay? The other way is when the controller is giving him a hard vector. Fly this heading, make this turn, be at this altitude. It takes a lot more time, hence fewer airplanes can land if everybody is being controlled that closely. Visual approaches allow us to land a lot more airplanes, a lot more quickly, more efficiently, we like to say. And at some places like LAX, specifically LAX, that's crucial because there's no place to put airplanes. They can't pull over to the side of the road and wait their turn, all right? So the CVFP ground track will be very much just to the east of 110, if it's developed, to the west of the 710, so you guys won't have an issue there, okay? Now, let me just, since I got the mic, 6,000 feet is the altitude at Dodger on one kind of procedure. And like I said before, we have lots of different ways to land airplanes. The very vast majority of the aircraft are not on that procedure. So if they're not at 6,000 feet, that's legal. The lowest they can get is what we call a minimum vectoring altitude, which is 1,000 feet above the highest obstacle within a certain area. We draw our areas out based upon geography and population. So he can be down at 2,000 feet and be legal. So the FAA is not breaking any rules. And I can tell you that if a controller ever breaks a rule, he gets what we call put on the beach. He gets suspended, right? So you know they're not breaking rules because the controllers are all standing at the beach. They're all working.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask that we wrap this up. We are way behind schedule right now. Sure, you bet.
Well, just, a point for the record, we're a little more precise and prescriptive in how we separate planes visually from each other. We don't tell them to not hit that guy. We are a little more precise than that. But and while we once had a process where controllers that made mistakes and got planes too close to each other were suspended, we have a more collaborative process in how we deal with performance issues these days, and we don't suspend folks. We re-educate and retrain them as necessary so that they can do their jobs properly.
Thank you. Can I add one thing to that? On a visual approach, and you've heard that term used a couple times now, the one thing that's important that you need to understand is the pilot has to be able to keep the airport in sight by shooting that approach. A visual flight procedure, which you're talking about, a chartered visual flight procedure, the pilot will be keeping a visual reference in sight at all times, which will lead him to the airport. So there are the differences between the two of them. And visual separation is yet a third one, which Dave referred to, and that's where they maintain themselves visually separated from another airplane. They're not all used together at one time. They're separate, completely separate events. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Erickson from Culver City, you have a report for us.
Well, we can skip that. We haven't had a meeting since our last time.
We're continuing to move forward.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna use this time later on instead because I have some interesting information from my trip to Washington, D.C.
Okay. In that case, we'll move forward. Mr. Alverson is going to talk to us very quickly about, even though he has a lot of charts, about the FAA authorization bill that was passed and what it means to us.
Actually, Mr. Chair, the next item is the discussion of future meeting locations.
Okay. Like I said, meeting locations. The next one will be at LAX.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the roundtable, members of the public, I think opportunities like this to come out to the communities that are affected are fantastic. I think it is beneficial for the community to see the roundtable here. It's beneficial for the roundtable members to interact with the community. But there are logistical issues that are related to this process. And I just wanted to briefly bring the roundtable some background information on it. There's quite a bit of work that's required on the secretary's part. The secretary is Los Angeles World Airport, represented by David Chan, to make sure that these locations meet the minimum requirements for a roundtable meeting. This is sort of the perfect venue. It has a microphone system, it has a recording system, it's ADA compliant. So in order to make sure that those requirements are being met, the roundtable members have seen a requirements checklist that was distributed by LAWA to help potential roundtable hosts see what we need to do in order to make these meetings work. So that'll be used going forward. Also, it takes a little while to do that coordination, and we really need the full period between the roundtable meetings to vet meeting sites. So a potential, and ideally I would say it's probably 3 to 4 months in advance of those meetings. So one potential approach to this is to consider alternating between the sort of standard LAWA site in remote sites or sites, or at least queuing up the various meetings several months in advance so Dave can do his work. So that's the main reason for this. There's no action required on the roundtable's part. This is informational only. The reason that there's an action next to this item is that if you were to vote to have the meeting in a different location this evening, then you would have to take that action. But you've just said it's going to be at LAX.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, thank you again. We really appreciate having you here with us and our being with you.
I've just made up 15 minutes of time.
You're a gentleman and a scholar. Now, as the thing that we've all been waiting for, the authorization bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the roundtable, my opportunity to speak to you tonight is about the FAA Reauthorization Act. And this is something the roundtable has tracked for quite some time. And I'm going to give you a very brief overview on this slide of the act. On October 5th, 2018, President Trump signed the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 into law. It authorizes the FAA, which is a much bigger organization than just our friends at the Air Traffic Control Division, over a 5-year period on a range of operational research planning efforts. And this is the way that this work gets done. It's the way that chartered flight procedures get looked at. And it's really, really key that this bill goes into effect. It's also really key that it's a multi-year bill. When we've had very short-term reauthorizations, as you know from having heard from Dennis Roberts in the past, it just kills the activity and the work that the FAA can do, like the TSAS project, to get that moved forward. So it's good news for communities around airports that rely on this funding. There's $3.35 billion annually that's available in this. That money, amongst other things, goes into noise compatibility planning, programs like sound insulation programs, much closer to the airport, and noise-related research that NASA and other agencies are doing. And it contains 14 noise-related provisions, which are really the focus of my presentation this evening. The Act doesn't contain language that would have separated the FAA's and privatized the FAA's air traffic control division. As you might recall, that was a very contentious issue. It's the reason why it took a couple years to get this bill, and once it was removed, it was a bipartisan effort to get it passed. So what I'm going to go through here pretty quickly, based on the chair's recommendation, so I can help make up time, is these 14 items that are related to noise in the bill. And I'm not going to go through every single one of them. In fact, what I'm going to do is pull this microphone. Can you hear me? Is it on? Yes. Yep. Perfect. So I can actually see the slide. And not touch each of these in depth, but just give you some highlights. So Section 172 talks about Stage 2 aircraft. These are old aircraft that were phased out of the fleet, and this talks about those coming back for some flights for basically maintenance. And this is really a couple of specific airports in the southeast that have these types of maintenance facilities. Those aircraft would come in from typically southern destinations in South America, would not affect LAX. They wouldn't be maintained here, so it's not a concern of ours. The alternative airplane noise metric evaluation deadline, that requires that the FAA complete an evaluation of alternative noise metrics, the current day-night average sound level. That's nationally. Here in California, we call it the community noise equivalent level. And it requires that that work be done within 1 year of the date of enactment. There's actually research on this metric that's been going on for a long time. However, it's unlikely that that research and work is going to be completed within this year time frame. So while I think it's meant to accelerate that effort, it's probably FAA may not have a chance to make that. This particular item regarding noise exposure maps, Los Angeles International Airport has a noise exposure map, also known as an NEM, defines the noise exposure around airports. Many airports have them. And this just talks about the process for updating those maps on a regular basis, particularly when operations change at the airport or fleet mix changes. Most of the airport district offices that oversee these preparation of these maps already have these procedures in place. So it's essentially codifying this approach for those airport districts office who don't follow this type of procedure. It is followed here in the Los Angeles Airports District office. 175 applies to new RNAV procedures, area navigation procedures below 6,000 feet. It could allow the airport to request dispersal of those headings, of those procedures. Number one, if the airport requests it. Two, if it wouldn't have a safety or efficiency implications, it would not significantly increase noise over other noise-sensitive areas, basically a no-shift noise policy. This is for new RNAV departure procedures, so it wouldn't be applicable here for the current RNAV procedures that are in place as a result of the Metroplex process. So this is a forward-looking item. The one challenge here is how and when does an airport make a decision about asking for departure flight tracks to be dispersed, and so it almost shifts some of that responsibility on the airport. Here we have departures that head out over the ocean most of the time, so we benefit from that. So again, this is probably not has much to play here in the Los Angeles community. The next item, 176, talks about community involvement in FAA Next Gen projects located in Metroplexes. Talks about the process that Congress would like to see the FAA follow, and lays out the guidelines for what they'd like to see the FAA do to improve community involvement in these Next Gen projects for Metroplexes. The short story on this is most Metroplexes are completed now. The FAA has gone through a round of Metroplexes. This is not going to be a process moving forward, so it really applies to only those locations where they've not undertaken a Metroplex. And again, most places where airspace changes are going to occur are not going to follow a Metroplex process. So this has limited application. Number 179, Airport Noise and Mitigation Safety Study requires the FAA to conduct and evaluate existing studies, analyses on the relationship between jet approach and takeoff speeds corresponding to noise impacts in surrounding communities. This is an outgrowth of work that's being done at Boston Logan International Airport, where there is some thought about, well, if we can slow the aircraft down on departure, it may in fact reduce the noise exposure on the ground. Of course, that has implications for backing things up. If you slow every single departure down, it affects the capacity of the system. This is work, as I said, that's already being done at Boston. It's a part of what's known as the Center of Excellence studies. So I would look to see that be very focused on Boston and continuing that work. The regional ombudsman requires the FAA to designate an ombudsman for each region who would serve as a liaison to address the issues of aircraft noise, pollution, and safety, and to make recommendations to the regional administrators to address concerns raised by the public. It's our understanding that the FAA has already been in the process of identifying and hiring these people. Sometimes it's moving one person from one position at the FAA to another. And I'll put Dave and Clark on the spot. Do you already have your ombudsman identified, or it's in process?
It is in process. We have not identified one for Southern California yet, but there will be one located in the regional office in El Segundo once we get that completed.
Great, thank you. And the idea is the ombudsman would serve as a liaison for the community to the other folks at FAA. 181, FAA leadership on civil supersonic aircraft. I've made a number of presentations about the growth and interest in supersonic aircraft. There are both commercial air carrier transport aircraft that are being developed, as well as business jet aircraft that are being developed for supersonic flight. Up to this point, they need to meet the so-called Stage 5, or the quietest standards, when they're manufactured. Congress has asked FAA to look into this to make sure that they can move this process forward. The one concern in this is that it refers to potential noise certification of this aircraft, which may mean that there could be potentially new, as it says in that last sentence, new noise standards for civil supersonic noise standards. A concern on the community side and airports, as well as a lessening of the standards that have already been put in place. So there's a potential battle brewing if that would be the case. I will mention that a few of the manufacturers that are out there who are planning on building these aircraft do intend to have them meet the Stage 5 standards out of the box. So for their takeoff and arrivals at airports, they would be consistent with the aircraft that operate here now. Of course, when they go supersonic, they would be much louder. Most of those right now, they can't fly over the United States going supersonic, so that would be only over water operation. But there's research underway to see if technology can be used to reduce those booms, muffle those booms, and in fact, right now out over the Gulf, some of that work is being done. So stay tuned in this particular area. 186 addresses Stage 3 aircraft study. The Stage 3 aircraft are now the lowest hanging fruit. They're essentially the loudest, if you will, aircraft in the fleet. And so the thought by Congress was to look at the Stage 3 aircraft that would be covered by this rule, to look at the benefits and cost of phasing those out. It refers to various stakeholders, including the air carriers, the aircraft operators, the airports, and the communities like yours surrounding it. Look back at when Stage 2 aircraft were phased out and obtain any lessons that were learned from that. Also look at the cost and logistical challenges of recertifying Stage 3 aircraft to meet Stage 4 noise levels and get input on the feasibility and desirability of phasing out Stage 3. Interestingly, there are relatively few Stage 3 commercial air carrier aircraft left in the fleet. Most of them have left by natural attrition. Most of the aircraft in the fleet now meet Stage 4 standards. So this would probably have limited application and benefit. Those Stage 3 aircraft that are left, like the MD-88s, are actually being phased out by the airlines who operate them because they're much more expensive to operate from a fuel consumption standpoint. Whoops, I just did my slides in. Here we go. This is the one that got mentioned earlier by Jeff. The FAA has been charged to looking into the potential health and economic impacts of aircraft overflight noise. Specifically mentioned here are the metropolitan areas, including the metroplexes in the Southern California Metroplex, to focus on the incremental health impacts on residents living partly or wholly underneath flight paths, most frequently used by aircraft flying at an altitude lower than 10,000 feet. So as you heard earlier, they're over Santa Monica between 7,000 to 8,000 feet. They come over this area 23 or so, again, MSL. So that would include potentially studying this entire area. And so that work would be done by a university as well as other teams that would get together and do this work to see what these health effects are. Ideally, this work would help inform looking at the alternative noise metric. So if we know that there are certain impacts at a certain noise level on health, then perhaps that would feed into choosing what that new metric might be. There's an environmental mitigation pilot program, puts $2.5 million out there to 6 airports to carry out pilot programs on ways to measurably reduce, mitigate noise impacts on air quality, water quality within 5 miles of the airport. The FAA would participate into 50% of that. And the idea was this would be carried out by a consortium of entities, including businesses, educational research organizations, and federal laboratories. So it'll be interesting to see if, in fact, there are airports that step up and express an interest in doing that work. And I believe that's my presentation. I'll open up to the roundtable members for any questions you might have.
Questions?
Just a real quick question. Stage 3, what is it, like McDonnell Douglas's and old, I don't know, regional carriers that are flying those?
Yeah, Jeff, as I mentioned earlier, there are very few of those aircraft left. For example, some of the initial Southwest Airlines 737s, the 300s were stage 3. They're all gone. The MD-80s are, and of course, they're now Boeing aircraft, formerly McDonnell Douglas. Those are stage 3 aircraft. Most of your current regional jets meet stage 4 guidelines right now, so there are relatively few left.
Quick question. On Section 189, you mentioned that communities such as that are in the San Gabriel Valley, like Monterey Park, would be covered because it does mention the Southern California Metroplex. But on Section 187, where it says to conduct a review of the impact of noise exposure on communities around airports, do we have, what are communities around airports? Is it defined by distance, or do you know?
Can you give me the full screen on that, David? Thank you. So this one, we believe, is linked to the other study in a certain kind of way, and it talks about compatibility guidelines within Part 150. So Part 150 lays out how you prepare noise exposure maps around airports. As I mentioned earlier, LAX has done that. The outer bound of those contours here in California are the 65 CNEL contour. So those are very close into the airport. Basically, they extend out to the east along the approach courses at LAX, but they don't follow that turn out towards Monterey Park and up towards West Adams and Culver City. So it's an area that's relatively close to the airport.
So close proximity around the airport is what I mean. Got it. Thank you.
You bet.
Steve, on the same one, on 189, the overflight health and economic stuff, didn't I hear at one point that there was an ACRP study as well that was including LAX?
Yes, I had heard that as well.
So I think that's what this is related to, isn't it?
Yes,
Good.
I believe so. Other questions?
Just one thing I wanted to mention is regarding 189, we specifically worked with our congressional delegation to make sure Southern California was in the study. So that is the impact to kind of underscore Teresa's comments earlier. That's the impact of working with your local congressperson, making sure that as these things come up, that we get some regional relief. And so Southern California was not originally included, and we pushed to have that in.
And I need to piggyback on that because I really, from my city and I think from the communities, I really want to thank Congresswoman Karen Bass. She has her representatives at the majority of our meetings. She interacts with us. She asked for feedback on what our suggestions were as far as, this new bill. So she really does work with this LAX roundtable and is a huge advocate to trying to reduce noise in the whole region. So I want to thank her and I want to congratulate her on her reelection. And I looked at the percentages, and she had the highest percentage when you look at everybody that was reelected. So I want to congratulate her on that as well. Thank you so much.
Her staff is a pleasure to work with, too. I work closely with them, so definitely.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe that the roundtable sent a letter requesting that Southern California be added to this as well, separately.
Yes.
And it looked like Margaret had a question. Come on up.
Come on down.
Use the mic.
So at the beginning, I mentioned the bill, HR 598. Is this equivalent? Section 189 is equivalent to HR 598?
Yeah, so the House bill and the Senate bill got approved. There were a lot of things that added to it, and ultimately this is the bill that the president approved that had all those provisions that were in 598 in there.
So would Monterey Park be included as part of the health study?
It says the Metroplex area, and you saw the altitudes that I mentioned there, so I believe that it would, but I'm not the person who sets out what they're going to study. But one would think that that's the case. And it referred to the Southern California Metroplex, and for those who are in the room who are not familiar with that, it covers all the way up to Santa Barbara, all the way down to the Mexico border, and all the way out to Nevada.
It's just that one of the sections that I saw was a 5-mile radius around LAX, so I just kind of was wondering if they're going to put a distance a limit on that also.
Yeah, two separate. Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mhm.
Really appreciate to
You
hear
bet.
that. Thank you, Dennis, for helping us with
And
that.
I will mention for the audience that there have been several health studies done by UCLA and USC as well, and they're available on their School of Health websites.
May I make one comment?
Sure.
It's interesting, and I'm glad that they passed, several provisions that will be beneficial to the LA area. And we received copies of this airport noise report. And I look at these to see what can we do. And one thing that was interesting to me that I thought might be included in this reauthorization bill, and I know some may laugh about this, but in London, they announced that they have their first hybrid electric airplane. And their airport is waiving their landing fees for this airplane to entice others to come forward, because as you start promoting these electric airplanes, they're quieter. So I know they're at a very infant stage in this whole development, but I thought that perhaps some money would have been set aside for R&D to try to advance this or see what we can do as far as trying to reduce the noise. We're trying to reduce noise and exhaust in our cars. We're asking people to take metro, but it seems like we're not really pushing one of the bigger culprits, which are the airlines. And so I would have thought that would have been included in here.
So it's not included in the federal bill, but I can tell you LAX and LAWA is doing a lot of work on environmental standards. So they're currently developing a sustainability action plan.
Okay.
And one of that covers ground transportation coming in, that covers emissions, that covers electrical equipment that are servicing the aircraft, that covers construction standards, wildlife restoration, habitat restoration, but it also does potentially include benefits and a sort of incentive program for those kinds of jets. One thing I will tell you that's a limitation for us in Los Angeles is at the edge of an ocean and it's surrounded by deserts and mountains. And right now, the range on those hybrid aircraft is estimated only 300 miles and below. And so,
No, I understand that,
will
but
be
I'm
a
just
limitation
saying,
for us.
to put some money into the R&D for this. I don't
Sure.
see it as something feasible within the immediate few years, but let's
Right.
say it's 10 years down the road. Are we putting any R&D? And I'd like to have a presentation on the roundtable if, LAX is doing something sustainable, because if it's going to affect the ground noise or the noise in the air, I think it's something that we need to know. But when I hear about these reports going on in other countries, I'd like that to be happening here in the U.S., specifically in the LA area, so we can brag about it a little too. So,
Thank you. We're going to move on to roundtable action items, and Robert, I don't think we said anything about the statistics that were passed out to us. And one of them, of course, is covering your area. So if you have a question on that.
I don't have a question. I received it in the email, and no comment on it. It speaks for itself.
In that case, thank you, David. You did
But
good.
yeah, thank you. Thank you to LAWA for
You did very well.
You're welcome.
And thank you, FAA, because you fixed some of the problems over Palos Verdes with some of the overflights of the peninsula.
Thank you, Dennis.
Jorn?
Well, are we over to member discussions now? Okay, well, so together with some city staff, I was in Washington, D.C. A couple of weeks ago. We hired an advocacy firm, lobbying firm, a little over a year ago. That's working for us with regards specifically to these noise issues with regards to LAX and FAA primarily. But what was interesting there was that we met with Senator Harris' office, with Senator Feinstein's office, and then we met with the Senate's Aviation Committee minority staff, which now is well, Senate is still going to be minority staff, but and we also met with the House Aviation Subcommittee, which is now going to become the majority. If they stay, I don't know, but the party is shifting. One of the messages that we got from all these meetings and discussions about this was they recommended us to start building a coalition outside of California. To start, the senators primarily wanted us to engage with other states and other senators, states and communities that have airports, and Maryland, Boston, there's a few that are working with similar issues as us. So that's one thing that is that we from our city would like to start doing, and the first thing is of course to start getting all the cities in the Southern California Metroplex to start really working together and being a cohesive voice as cities, and then work towards finding other allies around the country. We also had a meeting with the National League of Cities, the Transportation Committee staff, and the National League of Cities has a Transportation Committee that's have been working somewhat with airport noise issues, but not that much, and there is now an effort from their end, and I had to start looking at airport noise issues. That means that there is sort of a organization in Washington that frequently talk to our decision makers and their offices that could become an ally. We just need to engage and be active there. So that was interesting. So when National League of Cities had their conference here in LA last week, I was down there in the convention center, and I met with the chairman of the Transportation Committee for the National League of Cities, and he expressed again an interest for cities to get engaged into that committee that has airport issues, and then see if we can start moving that within that organization. We also met with the Noise Group last week, which is a national group that specifically deals with airport noise issues, and that's where I met the former head of the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport that had a very interesting presentation regarding how they work with the communities and all complaints, and not just noise complaints, but complaints in general. And then, of course, some wonder why we were in Washington, D.C., but it's also so that Calif City filed a lawsuit against FAA on the Metroplex for some problems we feel they have in their environmental impact report. So we were actually having oral argument at the federal court in D.C. Regarding this specific issue, and we are now waiting for a decision. So we don't know really it's very hard to read what the three judges really think from their questioning, but that was another reason we were there. So, but the takeaway now is to get other communities, other states, senators involved, because both Senator Harris and Senator Feinstein want to do this, but they feel they need more. And if we can find some that actually are on the other side of the aisle, which then, Texas or somewhere else, that would be good. That would make it even stronger. And then we can maybe move some of these issues forward and make sure that what came in FAA's reauthorization bill gets implemented in a fairly efficient and speedy manner.
Thank you. I again want to reiterate thanks to the folks in Monterey Park for all of the help that they've been to getting this meeting going, to have it established. And thank you, David and Lawa, for all the work you put in as well. Are there any other comments?
Well, I want to add something. I also want to say that I really appreciate that FAA is here today. That was actually one of the comments we got from the Senate's subcommittee on aviation, that they actually recommended us, say, hey, you should then request that the FAA in DC start sending people. If you don't have that relationship at the roundtable, you need to get someone. And they promised that they were going to help us to get people from DC. But now I see you are here, you're committing, and I really appreciate that. I think that is fantastic, because the way we solve these problems is by talking, and not, hopefully not by lawsuits.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to formally ask if we have a delivery date on the 360th South Bay noise report.
We still haven't finalized that report. So tentatively, we don't have a date, but hopefully we'll get it out before the end of the year, hopefully. Not a promise, but we'll shoot for that, at least.
Your contract with them didn't establish a delivery date?
What it did, I think the work that H&M did was completed, but the report still need to be finalized. So that's what we're in this stage right now.
Well, Steve, you always do the wrap-up.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I typically talk about the roundtable actions that were taken. There were no formal actions taken this evening. There were member requests. Of course, we heard Member Ribletta's request for the date on the 360. There's also member requests from Member Sebastian about the distribution of the ad hoc reports before the roundtable meetings. Jeff said he would work to get that. And then also Teresa just requested that there be a future presentation on sustainability at LAX by LAWA. And those were our items for wrap-up.
And without stealing Jeff's thunder, he did help me, and Kendrick also, to meet the folks doing all this, the sustainability stuff, and they're doing some very good stuff.
We also often had an agenda item that talked about the next meeting date, which David typically did. So David, can you give us that?
Yeah, the next meeting will be on January 9 next year.
Back at LAX.
6:30. With that, have a great holiday, and we wish only the best for our friends and relatives who are in the fires.
And thanks again to Monterey Park for hosting. We really appreciate it.
So maybe by next meeting?